Lies, Damn Lies, and Statistics. Benjamin Disraeli. And with that, welcome to House Einstein Podcast 16. And I'm Osman Parvez with House Einstein. And with me are Grant Gardner and Hamish Crabb. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello.
Today's podcast, we're going to be talking a lot about market data and the importance of market data. And we're also going to be interviewing Grant Gardner, who is currently wrapping up his internship with House Einstein. And in the past, we had interviews. But since the reboot, this will be the first interview that we're having on the House Einstein podcast. So you get to break the ice, Grant, and we get to learn a lot about you and your work here and how you came to be part of House Einstein. I get to practice my interview skills a little bit, and Hamish as well. And with that, why don't we get started? Oh, hold on. There's always the disclaimer. So we may be discussing real estate and investment topics in this podcast. And if you are a client of House Einstein, please reach out to us for direct consultation on your purchase and sale process. We are licensed real estate agents in the state of Colorado. At least I am, and Hamish is. Grant is our intern. He's not a licensed agent. And if you are a client, reach out to us. That's the best way to get advice for your specific real estate situation. If you're not a client, this is entertainment. This is not legal advice, financial advice, or real estate advice in your personal investment activities. All investments contain risk. And as they like to say on Wall Street, past results are not indicative of future returns. All right. With all of that said, the disclaimers are getting more colorful every time, more detailed. But that's our CYA. So enjoy the entertainment. All right. With all of that said, Grant, welcome to our podcast, and thank you for being the guinea pig for our rebooted interview. I just want to add a couple of things to kick off our discussion with you, and that is that we have at House Einstein as a team have been incredibly impressed with your professionalism, your thoroughness, your ability to work unsupervised with regular meetings on the calendar, your willingness to take a proactive approach to making sure milestones are being met and asking questions when you need further direction. And that's a rare quality. I probably didn't have that quality until I was 30, and you seem to magically have it in your early 20s, which is fantastic. And that's also your performance during this internship is also why we are having you on our podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I mean, it's been a great experience, and I've loved learning more about real estate in the local market.
Well, thanks, Grant. So tell us about you. Where did you grow up?
So for the most part, I grew up here in Boulder, Colorado, ever since I moved here when I was 4. I came through the public school system here. I went to High Peaks Elementary School, Casey Middle School, and then Boulder High. So I've been here ever since. Besides, now I go to college in Georgia, but I'm here for the summer, and just it's a beautiful place to be, and really great real estate market too, and very interesting.
Yep. And you're at the University of Georgia.
Yes.
And you're studying.
I'm studying finance and real estate at the University of Georgia.
Okay. And while you were here in Boulder, did you play any sports? And are you playing any sports now? What are your other areas of interest besides finance and real estate?
So in high school, I played soccer and ran cross country and track. And then during the summers, I'd like to go up into the mountains and climb 14ers, go backpacking, and just really spend as much time outside as possible, and just really enjoying the nature that we're so lucky to have here in Boulder and in the state of Colorado.
What took you to Georgia? I mean, that's sort of quite the departure from growing up here in paradise.
Yeah. So one side of my family is from the South in Texas, and my eldest cousin, he actually went to the University of Georgia and studied management information systems in the same College of Business. And when I was, I guess, in my late childhood, early teenage years, I went to summer camp in North Carolina and spent a ton of time with people that uh, are from Georgia. I'd say the people that went to that camp were predominantly from Atlanta, which is the same as the University of Georgia. I really enjoyed the people and the culture, and the University of Georgia in particular. I really enjoy the strong business programs, but also being at a really large school where there's strong school spirit. I have to say that having good sports was a big part of it. I'm a big fan of spectator sports, and the football team in particular is a huge part of the culture and really brings people together in Athens as well as throughout the entire state.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Do students automatically get tickets?
No. Well, if you're a freshman, you get every home ticket, but the other years you get about half of them.
Hmm.
And outside of that, you could generally, if it's not too good of an opponent, you can pretty easily get a ticket. But sometimes you're going to have to pay up into the hundreds of dollars to get a ticket if it's a big rivalry game.
Wow.
So
Okay. All
it's
right.
almost a religion down there, but it's really fun.
Well, it could be a religion here too with Coach Dion, Coach Prime. It seems to have, what's the word?
Ignited, I'd
Catalyzed,
say.
reignited passion for CU sports.
Yeah, it's going
Reignited
to be really
hope, at
exciting.
least.
It's going to be really
Sorry.
exciting to see how well that works out. I mean, Colorado's a historic program, and I really hope they're back there winning and that Dion sticks around if their success.
Yep, absolutely. What would you say are the big cultural differences between your experience? You've now been in Georgia for a full 2 years,
Yeah,
and what are the big differences between Boulder and where you are in Georgia?
well, I'd say that it's just in general more of a conservative culture. Uh, in particular, a lot of my friends there went to private schools, which is much less of a thing here in Boulder. So a lot of kids had, I guess, religious instruction, had to wear uniforms, had just lots of things that are different about school. And I mean, everyone played several different sports. Um, and I would say that there's much more of a spectator sport culture, and there's just less of the focus on the outdoors that there is here in Colorado. I mean, my friends in Georgia, their parents aren't out here doing 100-mile bike rides and things that I hear my friends' parents doing here. So it's a different culture, but I really enjoy it. I enjoy how welcoming people are, how kind people are, and how life's a little bit slower. But I really enjoy both cultures and try to uh, integrate both the best of both of them into my lifestyle.
Hmm. Okay, and you grew up here in Boulder, and do you have siblings?
Yes, I have two younger brothers. One just graduated from Boulder High, and he's actually following me to the University of Georgia. And then I also have a younger brother who's going to be in seventh grade.
Uh
And
huh.
yeah,
Uh huh. Yeah, maybe he also will follow you to Georgia. I guess we'll see. Um, and tell us more about how you grew up. What were what are your parents' occupations, and what was that like for you growing up here in Boulder? What's the culture in the public schools? How are the schools different?
okay. Well, to start with my parents, so my dad is a financial planner, and he's been doing that since I was about 4, and that really has played a huge part in how I was brought up. And financial literacy has always been very important in my family. I mean, I remember back to when I was 4 or 5, I had a piggy bank that had a save, a spend, and a donate category. So I've just always been very focused on making sure I'm smart with money and making uh, informed decisions, which also is part of the reason I was attracted to House Einstein. Just the focus on making sure that the numbers really work for any real estate transaction.
Hmm. Well, that's really cool. So your piggy bank had literally 3 slots.
Yeah, it had three little triangles that were connected by a big rubber band.
Oh, That's really smart. What an and it obviously had an impression. Um, well, one of the things that I often feel at a disadvantage about, despite living here in Boulder for 20 years, is that I didn't go to the public schools here. So sometimes I have clients that ask me about the public schools, and I don't have a frame of reference other than other clients and colleagues that are teaching have also been great resources for my clients. Like I'll put them in touch with a teacher who can actually tell you what's really going on, because there's usually so much more than just test scores going on. And I understand it changes over time. What was your experience in these three different schools? Like if you could kind of give us the synopsis of what it was like being a public school student, and was there a big difference between the private school kids? Did you see it like the private school kids too?
Okay, of course. So my first school, High Peaks Elementary School, so that's a school where everyone does open enrollment and it's really academically focused. And a lot of the kids I went to school there actually grew up in the suburbs and their parents would drive them in every morning. So that was definitely a very intense academic environment, but also was really good at making sure I got ahead in all of my subjects before middle school. And a lot of the people from High Peaks Elementary School end up gravitating to Summit Middle School, which is kind of also known for really strong academics as well as kind of the commuter culture. But it's such a sought after middle school that I actually, it's just you get a random I guess you get allocated a random spot, and just by luck you either get in and don't get in. And I didn't, so I wanted to go to Summit, but I didn't. I ended up far down on the wait list. So my second choice was Casey Middle School, which actually isn't my neighborhood middle school. That's my neighborhood middle school is Centennial, but the reason that Casey made more sense is, one, the building had just been completely redone, is beautiful, state of the art, all that beautiful location near downtown Boulder, as well as the strong bilingual program. I didn't mention this earlier, but when I was very young, 2 years old, I spent several months in Mexico with my mom and dad. I was the only child at this point, and so I kind of learned Spanish and English at the same time. But over the years, I'd weakened considerably in my Spanish language skills. So being able to go back into that environment and taking 2 to 3 classes every year in Spanish really got me back up to speed and had me in a place where I could confidently speak Spanish. And that experience is something I'm so grateful for and would really recommend to anyone who has kids in Boulder and are getting close to that middle school age. Just go do the bilingual program at Casey.
Hmm. That's awesome.
And
That's I didn't even know, Grant, that you. I mean, it was probably on your resume, but it didn't cement in my memory that you were fluent in Spanish.
yeah, so that's something I'm just so grateful for. And then from there, I ended up going a few blocks south to Boulder High School, which is my neighborhood high school. It's where anyone in the northern half of Boulder, that's their school. And that was also a great experience. I mean, mainly the two middle schools, Casey and Centennial, end up there. And so the culture, I'd say, is pretty similar to. Oh, sorry. I just going back to Casey Middle School. There's a lot more diversity once I got to that point. Much more of a Latino influence in that school versus High Peaks Elementary School, where there'd maybe be one or two people per grade that uh, were not white. I mean, is predominantly white, and then uh, Asian. But then uh, Casey was probably about 40% Latino. So that was
Hmm.
a new experience and really opened me up to some new cultures. And I really enjoyed that. And that trend continued on at Boulder High School, where there wasn't a bilingual program, but also a very strong Spanish program that would go up to the equivalent of Spanish Year 6. And
Wow.
oh, sorry. And then and the great thing about Boulder High is that it's an AP focused school. So if you're really academically minded, there's zero shortage of difficult classes you can take. And the teachers that teach these classes are just incredibly educated and smart and great at teaching. I mean, I think back to one year where half of my teachers were Ivy League educated, which is just incredible to find at a public school. And makes me feel really lucky to grow up in Boulder.
Wow, I did not know that either, that you would find that level of Ivy League education at a public high school. And what about the rivalry with Fairview?
So the rivalry with Fairview, it's all really funny because it's just going 1 mile south on Broadway, and the way people act, you'd act like you're from different parts of the country or something like that. But I mean, it's a fun rivalry, but in reality, people are kind of the same at both schools. I'd say the main differences are more of the commuter culture that I had at High Peaks Elementary School, and what I said about Summit that continues on at Fairview. And Fairview also has the IB system, which I don't know that much about, but just a little bit different. And they're both really academically minded high schools, but I'd say that Fairview's even more so. But I mean, you cannot make a wrong decision going to either school. And in reality, the kids are almost identical at both schools. So it's kind of a joke to think about how people make people at the other school out to be enemies. Whereas, wow, you grew up in the exact same zip code or one zip code away.
That's really funny. I do remember having a client who was selling a home in North Boulder, and we're starting to look at homes in South Boulder, downsizing, and his adult daughters were just so anti South Boulder because of that weird rivalry. Like, it was instant disdain for South Boulder that I'd never heard that before from these young people that had that in their minds. Well, that's super interesting, Grant. So how did you end up in finance and real estate as an undergraduate focus area for your degree?
So, finance has kind of always been my plan to go into. I loved listening to books about how people built companies and how different markets work, and as well as podcasts. And it's also something that my parents thought would be a good career and something valuable to learn about from an early age. And then from there, kind of just stumbled into real estate. The way that your first 2 years work at the University of Georgia, if you're an intended business majors, you need to take a bunch of prerequisite classes before you can apply to the business school. But I came in with lots of credits thanks to the AP Focus program at Boulder High School. So I just kind of had to take some of my electives earlier on before I could apply to the business school. And I just signed up for the real estate elective on a whim. And I ended up loving that class, and just the whole idea of real estate as a physical asset class and all the different methods to evaluate, as well as just really turn a heterogeneous asset class and try to make it somehow homogenous was something I really enjoyed. And from there, I had enough space left with credits that I needed to add a second major, and real estate immediately made sense for me to add.
All right, so you lost me for a second there. What does it mean to turn a heterogeneous asset class into a homogeneous asset class?
Okay, well, by that I mean is just it's sometimes really hard to find the value of different real estate properties. So just trying to go and find comparable properties or cash flows and just things and just different strategies that you can do to try to, as accurately as possible, view real estate in the way that you value stocks or bonds or other investments, and just really try to make a sound financial decision.
Okay, got it.
I've got a question.
Well, no, go ahead.
I'd say, what was your favorite part of that elective? Maybe an exercise you had to take or a project?
Yeah. My favorite exercise in that elective was doing a discounted cash flow on an apartment complex.
Cool. What discount rate did you use?
I think we used 15%.
Oh, wow. That's pretty aggressive discount rate. Well, so that's super interesting, Grant, because I remember in my business classes, I thought those exercises on valuation, like a discount cash flow analysis, were interesting, but didn't really juice it for me. Like it didn't move the needle. as they would say. And I really wanted to get into investment banking and equities research. And so after my first round of startup failure, I went and worked in New York and worked in equities research and learned a ton. Oh man, the acceleration was amazing. But then I realized that it was just the cultural fit, at least in the firm I was with, was not very strong. So after a few years, I decided I'd had enough. And long story short, I ended up working in real estate. This is about you, not about me. So we'll tell that story another time. But how I use the phrase "stumbled upon" many, many times, and I still use it today when people ask me how'd you get into real estate. It's really was a stumble upon moment where I was naturally curious how these little brokerages are operating and who works in them, how their economic models work, how their business models work, and is it an interesting business or not? And I, in a roundabout way, ended up interviewing for a different position with somebody who was on the board of a community sailing organization. And I wasn't a good fit for that position, but he ended up making me an offer for his own company, which needed somebody who could do financial analysis, build pitch books, put together an investment model, and help raise capital for a commercial project. And he had a brokerage. And wanted help with the brokers. And so I stumbled upon it. So your stumbled upon comment really registers for me because when I didn't have a single person in my undergraduate pursue real estate. There was a business school component to where I went to undergrad, and none of them were pursuing real estate. Yet it's one of the most widespread asset classes. And it's a fundamental human need on the residential side, but businesses also need places to operate. Retail needs places to sell things to consumers. Industries need places to manufacture. Farms need places to grow food. And the entire financial system here in the United States, and probably worldwide, but very much in the United States, is geared toward facilitating real estate acquisition, disposition, and management. And it's just, I don't know why it wasn't positioned like that in my business classes. Why we were just more fixated on basic business principles. But once I realized the opportunity and how it's underserved analytically, I realized I have a skill set that actually applies very well, and you do too, Grant and Hamish. You're also developing one to real estate that needs it. The tricky part, at least in residential, is offering higher level services to people that aren't necessarily looking or thinking about it, because it's sort of a hurdle for people to grasp that the people you're hiring as a realtor, it also is functioning like an investment advisor, where they are actually helping you understand the data and understand what's happening in the market, and hopefully making an intelligent decision that isn't just designed to line the pockets of the real estate agent. And that's one of the founding principles of how we do work here at House Einstein. And when I learned about your search for an internship and your resume, your major, I asked to see your resume. I'm like, this might be a great fit. And indeed, it has been much, much better than I ever imagined it would be. So why don't you tell us more about some of the projects that you've worked on that are analytical, that have the ones that were most interesting during your internship here this summer?
Okay, great. Well, from the very beginning, when me, Hamish, and Osman had our first conversation about what an internship might look like, it was apparent that the most important thing was that I was providing value to House Einstein, as well as this experience providing value to me. So, at the beginning of the summer, I ended school at the very beginning of May, and started working pretty soon after that. And here in Boulder, that was house valuation appeal season. This year, a lot of people in Boulder were shocked to see how much their the valuations of their houses had gone up and how much they were going to be paying in taxes. So the first thing I did was work on learning how to find houses for tax appeals, and I would be given a huge data set. Okay, maybe some of these houses could potentially make sense to help lower the value of this home for tax appeals. And and then that whole project. So in the beginning, I helped Osman with some of his properties, and then from there, I was able to move on from clients, and that was what I predominantly worked on the first month of the internship. And that was great because, I mean, just from hearing back from people, they were so appreciative that just having some experience and helping them through this honestly really complicated process. I mean, the way that Boulder does tax valuations and how you have to appeal them is Boulder's kind of broken into these random zones that don't exactly make sense, and you can only use houses within these zones for your appeals, as well as there are these calculators for the appreciation of your houses over time. So it's a really complicated system, but being able with Osmond's help to figure that out over trial and error over a couple of weeks, and then there at the end help a lot of people with their appeals. That was really fun and it made me feel good knowing that I was providing value to clients and not just being an intern doing busy work that didn't help anyone. And
Thanks
then
for that, Grant. I agree that was more complicated than I anticipated, because I had Jerry Roberts used to be the tax assessor for the city, for Boulder County, and I had him on my meetup. I used to host a real estate meetup here in Boulder, and he joined and he gave us a thorough explanation of how tax assessments are done and how the assessors think about real estate, and it was very useful and informative. But the system changed radically from that time period over a decade ago when he was in my meetup and presenting, and I wasn't expecting it to have changed that much. And so we kind of learned together how we were doing it wrong initially, and then it has astonished both of us that this is the system, because the average person is not going to get the right comps. They're also not going to properly present them, and maybe it's even geared towards intentionally. I mean, this is the conspiratorial thing, like making it harder on purpose so that there are fewer successful appeals. Yeah. So, and I also thank you for noting that was our first conversation about this internship opportunity, and I feel strongly in not wasting people's time. And so, if you're going to give your blood, sweat, and toil, your mental resources, your energy towards our company, it has to be in a way that actually does add value to you too. And so, having you run around and fetch coffee is not the answer. That's not a very effective and useful internship for you. It also has to be paid. We don't do free internships. I think that's abusive, and I know a lot of companies do. So all of that, matched up really well, and you lived up to those expectations. And I appreciate you bringing it back to that, because sometimes we forget, we've been working together for a while. You're in all our team meetings. You're organizing a bunch of projects, and we kind of forget the big picture of how you got here and why you're here, and you've been adding value. We're going to miss you when you're gone because of all the different ways you've been adding value. So what was the next project that you feel like is worth calling out?
So, and then from there, what I started working on was primarily two types of projects. One was updating indexes on, first was the basic ranches in Boulder, and just finding data from 1997 on to now on the volume, asking price, sale price, percent of asking, median, all these important statistics about how 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, starter homes in Boulder have appreciated, and how they've changed over time. And
that's the basic. So this used to be the Martin Acres Index that I created, I don't know, 10 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that, and then started tracking with data all the way back to 2000. But clearly has outlived its usefulness, given that there are entry-level or starter ranches all over Boulder, although that neighborhood tends to be the entry point, baseline too, to some extent. So we're now updating that, and you've already provided the first stab at crunching that data to help help it illustrate what's actually happening in the market for these entry-level homes in Boulder. Yeah.
So,
any takeaways? Anything that kind of stood out from that experience?
Well, every year the volume of these basic ranches just goes down and down. I mean, they're already rare, and they're just going to become exceedingly rare over time, to the point where it's only a handful of these that sell a year. So this is just going to drive up the prices, and potential buyers in this market need to be aware that if one of these houses pops up, you need to be able to, I guess, make a quick decision if the home makes sense for you. I mean, I'd almost compare it to old homes on Mapleton Hill where they only come around every once in a while. I mean, 15, 20, 25 years ago, these houses hit the market every single week, but these days they're rare. So I'd say that's the biggest takeaway. And of course, just as happened throughout the country, especially in Boulder, we're nearing $1 million median sale price on these starter homes. It's just crazy how expensive of a market Boulder is, and how more and more people want to live here. More and more very well paying employers are here. It's an expensive market.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that observation, and I'll hammer on that too. That I tell my clients these entry level ranches are the safest investment in Boulder real estate. For every listing, there's usually a line of people that want to buy it, and they're not making any more of them. And this is the entry point. So there's tremendous depth of market that protects your asset, your capital value that you've invested from downside risk. And is the upside risk as great as a mid-market house? That's another question, right? When you kind of compare those two potential investments, and then also, can you and your family, or you and your friends, or you and your partner, or just you solo, can you live in this home, given that it's much smaller than the average size home that's sold today? And conveniently, somebody in this podcast just bought one of these style homes, although not in Boulder, but basically the exact home we're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of our talking points here on the calendar is qualitative analysis versus technical analysis, and we're diving pretty deep into the qualitative details of a home and kind of what makes it a decent investment product. And just in my short time at House Einstein, you start to kind of notice this. We talk about a car background quite often, and when we're looking at in a former life, we were looking at different types of cars and different features and what would make it worth a flip or a sell, or kind of what's a good buy and what's not. Is houses have a very similar playbook of features and qualities that make it more marketable than others. And I was actually fairly interested in finding something ridiculously unique for a home, and I ended up with I got a ranch with a basement, and it's incredibly functional, and also it has all this potential as well for expansion and personalization. But knowing that it was kind of I wouldn't want to use the term safe bet, but knowing that it was a fairly solid purchase just because of my experience here, and then seeing how those Martin Acres ranches have performed, and kind of what makes that house type such an appealing property. It definitely played into the purchase of this one. So
yeah, I mean, they work for so many types of people, buying or renting, because the bedrooms are all on the main, and the living area and kitchen can be opened up. Usually there's a wall separating them. They can be opened up relatively inexpensively. You can vault the ceilings. You can put on a second story. I even know of one person who didn't pop up. They popped down because of the restrictions around what is feasible and not feasible. They found out they could actually build an underground, a larger basement, basically. That's the basement is larger than the footprint of the house, and that gives them an additional den, living area, rec room, more storage, and you can't even see it from the street because it's in the ground.
I can't imagine that was cheap.
I don't really know the economics of how that worked out, but it might have actually not been too bad, because the primary construction is masonry, right? It's concrete walls. And then I don't know what they built on top to support the hidden, I think they put a patio on top or something. I can't remember what they put on top, but
cool.
Anyway, people have even popped down, not popped up, with these style homes. All right, Grant. Cool. Well, I'm glad you found that project educational. There's some of these that I need to pick up the analytical, what's the word? I need to pick up where you left off on that one, because I want to take that data and start presenting it to some of our clients, as well as put it out on our social media and on our blog and in our newsletter, so that people can see what we're talking about, what's happening in the market. And as always, we're from the show me state. We want to not just talk about qualitatively what we're seeing, but show you why we think these things. Cool. And I think one of the other major projects you've been working on, and I haven't seen an update on this because it's for Ian, is you've been crunching numbers on all of the neighborhoods in Boulder.
Yeah, so that's been this was actually a project I finished a few days ago, where Ian, one of the agents here at House Einstein, he grew up in Boulder and has tremendous knowledge of the different neighborhoods and the nuances that people that haven't lived here for 30 something years would have. So he went and gave me data sets on different neighborhoods in Boulder. He broke Boulder down into 33 neighborhoods. And after giving me that data, I was able to find some simple statistics like volume this year versus last year, median, percent of asking price, and just kind of get a little gauge on how each neighborhood is performing within the Boulder market. And that was a great project and taught me a lot about how even just street to street, how values can change, and what aspects of different parts of Boulder drive home values above the median price for the area or below. And that was a great project. And I guess it took a while just because of all the different data sets, but I was really valuable, taught me a lot about Boulder, and I think will really provide value to agents and clients who want to learn about one neighborhood versus another.
Cool. I look forward to seeing what Ian does with that. I imagine there'll be some video content, Hamish, that we'll see at some point soon, where he talks about how that's broken out. And uses some of your graphics skill set. So I'm pretty excited to see how that plays out when the content is born from the data, because that's the other piece, right? It's not just doing the analysis; it's being able to tell the story. Mm-hmm. And that means reading the analysis, understanding what's happening in the data, understanding the analysis, and then the final piece is communicating that. And it's amazing how often people fall apart when it comes to communicating it. They tend to over communicate, and then you overwhelm people with data, and really people often miss the story of what's really happening. So for example, the story of small ranches in Boulder is a story of declining volume, and more of these homes have been converted into larger homes. And that story is one of declining supply that's not 1 or 2 years old. It's a 20 plus year phenomenon. It's now coming up on 25 years in the data set we've been using, seeing that decrease in volume year after year after year, seeing homes that started at $35,000 to $50,000 when in the late 90s, and now are at almost $1 million today. So what's the story there for buyers and sellers? For sellers, I always try to encourage people not to sell. I'm like, you're selling an incredible asset that you could rent out. There are so many different things you could do with this. You could also borrow against it. But if you need to sell it and you don't want to be a landlord, we will help you sell it, and we will do our best for you, and we'll show you all the different ways we market and sell homes better than our competition. But I really, as an investment advisor, I'm like, what other asset could you possibly replace this with that makes more sense than this? Tell me, because I would like to invest in it.
Yeah, I'll get out of this too.
And on the buy side, I always tell my clients that are looking for entry-level houses that this is such a safe investment. You're making a smart decision. And I feel good about saying that because the data backs up that story. And that is the story. And that's why we do sell a bunch of entry-level houses every year. It's also why I would like to purchase more of them. They're great investments. But they are harder and harder to find. And we just closed on one a couple of weeks ago that was in rough condition, needs updates across the board, found the right people our clients, these are 4-time past clients, 5 times once we list their home up here in the mountains, that know how to remodel a house and do so with incredible style. And can't wait to see that listing that they're bringing on market soon.
Great people. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome people. Okay. Grant, anything else you would like to add about your internship experience? Any kind of final thoughts? I mean, we're going to continue in the podcast and talk about even more about the importance of analytics. There's one particular scenario I want to talk about, but any last thoughts on your internship?
Yeah, well, just quickly, I want to mention one more project I worked on. I have a strong interest in history as well. So something else I've done is spent uh, a considerable amount of time at the Carnegie Library, combing through old articles and photos of neighborhoods in Boulder going back 70, 80, 90 years, and going and creating a database of these photos and articles that really just tell the story of Boulder and the different neighborhoods and how it's become the city it is today, and how a lot of the fights that people in Boulder have currently are the same fights that happened 50 years ago about development. People who already live here don't want more development, and how people don't want people driving or parking in their neighborhood, and how it's just some things never change, and you really feel that here in Boulder. But overall, I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to work here at House Einstein over the summer. It's been great. I've really enjoyed having more independence than I think I can expect to have any time in the near future and job. And I also have learned a lot about real estate and how to create good and sound data analytics. And I'm just really appreciative to Osman and the rest of the team for this opportunity.
Oh. Well, thanks, Grant. It's been excellent having you. And one of your final tasks before you leave next week is to send us a recommendation for improvements, because we do our best, but you have an outside perspective of this company that none of us have, because we've been in the trenches, and you have a very analytical and gifted mind, and a keen observational mind, and an interest in history, and an interest in entrepreneurship. So if you have a list of recommendations, as many as you'd like to make, 3 to 5 or 50, I'm all ears. Please do send me an email with those thoughts, because it would be very helpful to me. And we are absolutely happy to act as a reference for you. It's been a pleasure, and you've been one of the best, if not the best intern we've had. And I really feel like it's a special place to encourage. It's an opportunity. What's the word? I don't want to say entitlement. It's a place of, what's that word? It starts with a G. Where there's definitely gratitude happening, but there's this sense that we're very fortunate to have had you, and also encourage you in the direction you want to go in, because I know you're going to do great things. And hopefully this was a tiny little step in the many steps you're going to take in your professional career when you go out there and kill it and are successful. I have no doubt you will be. So. All right, let's keep going with the analytics. You guys ready? Anything else to add, Hamish?
No, just that this segues quite well into our part 2 of the podcast.
Part 2 of the podcast. Okay, so Here's part 2, and this is born from and you could put this on screen later, Hamish, if you want to add this into the video itself. But
I like that.
This is a tweet from a large national title company, a legit title company, not fly-by-night title. And I won't mention their name, because we don't do that. We only criticize by category and praise by name at House Einstein. But this company tweeted just blatantly erroneous data about our local real estate market. And it showed that inventory year over year was massively down for single-family houses here in Boulder County, and it's demonstrably false. It's absolutely wrong. And I immediately tweeted back, guys, this doesn't match up with the data. What's your data source? And I know it's wrong, because they've got to be using the same data we are. The primary MLS is where you list homes. And so what data are they, where did this come from? I don't really know, but I sense the backstory is that there's a disconnect between the people making the charts and the people posting them. And because there was no response to my question, where'd they get this from? Because it's wrong. And that's my guess, is because the social media person doesn't know what to do with somebody who's telling them their data is wrong. And here's the issue. And this is something that I looked at as an opportunity when I first got into real estate. This is way before Zillow existed. And that was, the financial world, particularly the equities markets, but the financial world in general, is awash in data. Not all of it is publicly accessible. For example, bond values and trading is not publicly accessible, but institutional players do have access to databases and can see what's going on, and the public can also see what's going on in the public markets. Right? We know what's going on with government treasuries. We know what's going on, and it's generally perceived as accurate. Whether you get that from the New York Times or Bloomberg or Yahoo Finance or the Wall Street Journal or even the Daily Camera, the odds are that the data you're seeing about the S&P 500 and what happened on the Dow is probably about right. It might be slightly off in terms of very, out into the decimal points, and when they, the closes are usually absolutely right. But midday, there's a delay in trading, which most people are not, don't need up to the millisecond information. They're not day traders. So the information is accurate. And I remember using the Bloomberg terminal and Capital IQ when I worked for investment firms, and those databases are generally perceived as accurate. Information in real estate started non-existent from what I could see, other than the MLSs, where if you had the skills, you could download data and do some analytics on it. But the data that was being pumped out by the associations and by the MLS were so late that it wasn't actionable. So you're getting data that's too old to be useful, if it's accurate at all. And so I saw that as an opportunity. And then Zillow came in and started producing tons and tons of data. Also, not like the accuracy was not actually very good, but at least it was more frequent and you could do more drill downs, and the GUI, the graphic user interface, was better. And so the average consumer loved it. And that in some ways took away my initial thunder in this market, was the ability to provide better analytics. And now we're seeing agents all over the place republishing charts. And some of these come from their brokerages. Some of them come from title companies. Some of them, I don't know where they're getting this from. Like with this title company, I have no idea where they got these numbers from, but it is demonstrably false. And the risk with this is that people are making major life purchase and sale decisions. These are the largest investments they tend to make in a lifetime. Most people, not everyone, but most people, these are very large investments, sometimes based on bad data. And it's just, I would actually say, not just sometimes, more often than not, they are not getting the complete story, or they're getting a story too broad to be useful. Like what's going on in the national market is not as relevant as what's going on your street. And for your particular property type, like the small ranch index for Boulder, for example, comparing that to what's been happening at the national level is a complete different conversation. Right? Like it doesn't really make any sense to compare these two things, because the local market could be radically different. I'm not saying it's not impacted by the national market. It is, but you have to pay attention to local level data and hope you get accurate data. And this is why I continue to tell people that if you're getting information from your agent, you should ask them where they got their data from. And you should start asking questions, because you may or may not be getting very accurate information. Buying or selling.
I think this kind of ties into a theme that we've touched on pretty much every podcast since our reboot, which is you have this huge breadth of professionalism within real estate. And so whoever's running the data might not necessarily have that experience to accurately perceive and think on this data.
Well, quite often what might happen is somebody is doing the number crunching and not thinking, right? And suddenly there's one column off, or they chose the wrong spreadsheet.
Yep.
And they're thinking it's Boulder, but it's not. And suddenly they've put together a graphic that shows Boulder having year-over-year inventory that's declined 20%, when the reality is it's the opposite. It's gone up that much. How, or more? How is it possible? And so it's a fascinating industry. And when I first got into it, I found it a little bit frustrating, even more than frustrating, because people assume you're a used car salesman when you're a real estate agent. They don't think you have these skills. And it was a unique capability that I brought, I felt at the time, to be able to do analytics in the local market. Other people have that skill set too. You don't have to have worked in the investment community to ask intelligent questions about what's going on in the market, but you should ask those questions, whether you're buying or selling. And so I'll give you an example on the sell side. We have a number of listings that are active right now. The market is cooled in this particular geographic location and price range. It doesn't mean that these listings aren't going to sell, but it's no longer a bidding war the moment you list. It's a game of waiting for the right buyer in particular. And we have another listing that might have that same kind of characteristic where it's a niche market. And so we are regularly, often every week, reviewing what's going on with these listings. Who is the competition? What do the prices look like per dollar per square foot? What's the relationship with the size of the lot? How far, the relationship with some of these is really the distance to the city of Boulder also has an impact. And we are looking at that analytically. And I literally just put together a detailed spreadsheet for one of our clients with, did the X and Y, charts so he could see that if he were to drop the price at this level, there's so much more support and density of sale transactions occurring below 900, for example, than above 900. And without having done that homework and putting it into a visual, I wouldn't know either that there's that much more activity. And it's just shocking to me how few other agents are scheduling showings on these listings before they themselves list a competitor. Like they haven't actually seen ours, so they don't know how we shape up. And one of the first things we're going to do is go schedule a showing on the competitor so that we can understand how to position our listings relative to this new entry. And I just am astounded by it, but it happens over and over again. And I was really surprised to see this title company, no less, punching out bad data.
Which is funny. You shared with me earlier market update from another title company with extremely high praise too. So you've got dueling companies posting data, and some are very good. Yeah,
I will mention that we can mention that title company by name. So that company is Land Title, and they have invested in a person who regularly provides market updates. And so far, for the last couple of years, I haven't seen major erroneous information coming from the content that Land Title is putting out there. It seems to be accurate. So at this point, Land Title's analytics, I would say, are reasonably trustworthy. It's one of these, trust but verify things. Does this pass the sniff test? And if it doesn't, the first thing I'm doing is opening up the MLS and dumping all the data that's relevant into a spreadsheet and checking myself. I mean, we have our own models to do that, so it doesn't take that long to do a regular update. But not at the county level. But one thing that nobody really is doing very well is the neighborhood and street level, which is what, Grant, you were working on. And part of that is that it's time consuming and it's not evergreen. So the information that you publish today on what's happening in one neighborhood is going to change in 6 months. And it's such a niche that it may not be useful to go that far down the rabbit hole unless you have a client, right? Like if you have a client that wants to buy in Mapleton Hill, we're going to pull up every Mapleton Hill transaction for the last 20 years and then start to break it down by size of home, year of construction, which street, because it's down to the street level, not just in Mapleton Hill, but in every neighborhood. But in Mapleton Hill, I would have a serious conversation with the client about whether you really want Mapleton Drive, that road, to be in the data set, because it's kind of different than some of the other streets that are quieter and don't have the nameplate. Less traffic, maybe less prestige. Is that a factor in this, qualitative factor in this analysis? For a more normal neighborhood, it could just be how close are you to a busy road. So for Martin Acres, it's, are you actually within 3 houses of Moorhead, which is impacted by US 36? Are you up against Lashley? Are you on Lashley, which is up against Broadway? Massive difference in valuation, different markets. So, yeah, I just, the whole point of this topic, and we're approaching a full hour, but the whole point of this was to really drill down into the importance of analytics with real estate decisions and how there are no shortcuts. And even a reputable title company can put out bad data, and maybe it's a mistake, a one-time issue, or maybe it's a pattern of putting out data that doesn't make sense. Like the prevailing pattern has been inventory rising, not new listings, but active inventory, right? The unsold pile of homes. is growing. So how can we be down year over year?
Suddenly they're gone. Blackstones come through.
Right. Right.
Wow. No, another
So,
one
Hamish,
we're
did
seeing
you,
too. Or go ahead.
when you wrote your offer on the house you bought, did
Mhm.
you look at the comps?
I did. I took a fairly loose look at it. I've been kind of looking at the neighborhood where this house cropped up for quite a while, and you know, there's a ton of demand at the price point that I was shopping, and I also had written an offer previously that was outbid. There were 18 other offers on that property, and one of the biggest takeaways that we learned from that was you need to look at other houses in a similar area for a similar price and see how much over they went, because we knew there was so much demand. So that really helped us dial in what I should expect this house to go over, because it wasn't more or less a question of, is this house worth it? It's like, this house is going to go over ask. That's just how they go in this price range in this area with these features. So yeah, I put together a little comp set within the specific neighborhood. I live in this neighborhood, so it was really easy for me to define it. And then I looked on the high end and the low end of what went over and what didn't, and put my offer with an escalation up to that point, and actually hit it about within $1,000. So I was really stoked on that. Yeah, it came through pretty proper.
I mean, I find that always an interesting exercise. Usually the listings that are active and under contract or recently closed, I can usually get the listing agent to tell me what the sale price was for the pending contracts, or at least close to it. And for certain, obviously, the closed sales, you can see the data, but the closed sales are 30 to 45 days old, even if the most recent data, and that may not be what's happening right now. It's interesting how some agents keep that data close to their vest. But what's even more interesting is how few agents pick up the phone and call.
Or care to look.
Who care to look. And I'm wondering, how are they advising their buyers and sellers if they're not doing this work? And it's not that time consuming. It builds better relationships. Pick up the phone. Hey, it's Osman with House Einstein. I've got a client that's getting ready to offer on 123 Main Street. And we noticed that you have 113 Main Street, an identical house under contract that went under contract 2 weeks ago. Can you kind of tell me how that went? And they might say, well, we were lucky we got asking, or it ended up way below, and we've got some inspection issues we're working through, or we got 18 offers. Wow, 18 is and how you ask this question is very important. I usually never ask what's the contract price, because then they feel like they may be divulging something that could compromise their client. So instead, I ask, are you over 20 over a list? Are you 15 over list? And that gives me enough info to tell my client roughly where it's going to end up. But I usually don't know exactly.
It's where you give them a value to say yes, no to, right? You don't want to say how much over list. You say, are you
25? Yeah, here, are you above this number? Holy cow! Are they cash? And because it builds better relationships in the real estate community, seasoned agents almost always are willing to share confidentially some information to help us help our clients. And the rookies in the industry sometimes are scared to do that because they're not sure. And I had one person tell me that contracts are confidential. And I said, really? And I went and I looked. I did a control F for all the contracts, and the word confidential does not appear, at least at the time, in the buyer agency or in the agreement to buy and sell, which are the contracts that we frequently use here in the state of Colorado. It may have changed. There is a checkbox whether or not you have permission to divulge the names of the buyers if you have a listing agreement.
Yeah,
but that's it. The identity. That's the only question. And so we can redact the contract and send it over if it's necessary. And sometimes in bidding wars with escalation clauses, that's what we ask for, is if you want to execute with this escalation clause, if you want to enact this escalation clause, we're from the show me state, send me the competing contract. Feel free to redact identifying information. And sometimes agents are scared to do it. And the seasoned ones usually will send it.
I got one.
And the trick, Yeah, the tricky part is it really competitive or not? Like, is it like if it's a cash offer is the same thing as a non-cash offer, so you don't have to escalate if it's not really. Well, it depends on how you wrote it, how
And
you wrote the additional provision.
And then also that can give you bargaining chip too. You know, you can be like, well, hey, maybe sure they have a higher price, but I'm much more lenient on contingencies, and you can still stay in the deal slightly with that kind of thing.
You can make that argument.
Yeah.
So that's why we always write in the words of similar terms. When I write my additional provision, the escalation clause, I usually put in that language. Buyer will increase their offer price by X dollar amounts up to a maximum of X dollar amounts. In order to execute this clause, seller shall send buyer competing contract of similar terms or of similar or better terms within on or before the acceptance deadline, right? It's not perpetual, and that opens up an interesting conversation with that agent usually, and I imagine some very interesting conversations between the listing agent and the seller, because now they have to ask themselves, really, is this other like they know they're not dealing with a fool, right? That's just going to go offer more. Because what if it's a 1%? I had one, right? And so the reason I write that is because this was here in Boulder, and we represented the buyer, and we wrote something similar to that language. And this is years ago when bidding wars were just starting. And the competing contract they sent over had it might have been written Crayola. That's how I kind of described it, because it was nothing down, 0% down. Yes, it had a higher price. It was full of errors. And I was so aghast at seeing this messy contract that I looked up the buyer's agent. I'm like, who is this guy? Who is this person? And it was a bartender at the Med, which is now no longer open. The Med was a restaurant on Walnut. The building's still there.
Not that there's anything wrong with bartenders.
Nothing wrong with bartenders, okay? But his LinkedIn listed him still as an active bartender. And he happened to have a real estate license and maybe was transitioning to a new career path. I'm not criticizing this person, but their date of licensure, which you can also look up, was also very recent. So this was a new agent without much guidance and writing an offer that was, I called it in Crayola because it was that bad. And now our listings agent was asking us to escalate on the basis of this contract having a higher price. And I advise my clients, look, this is not a good contract. Like, technically, it's a higher price, but I think you can tell them to go pound sand. If they want to sell it to you, this is the price your contract stands, because this other and I'll lay out all the reasons why this contract is nonsense. And they agreed, and I did, and the seller capitulated, and we got it for our original offer price without the escalation. They tried. They tested us. They failed because that contract was garbage.
Yeah.
So it happens. And by the way, you can be a bartender and then in a few years be an exceptional agent, but it does take practice. It does take experience. It's not born overnight. And
it takes exposure too. I'll say that's I've learned, in insane amounts just by being exposed to all the deals that we have going on each time. Just being able to look and see.
I mean, you're functioning as an assistant to 3 agents, all of whom are doing deals. And so in the course of a year, you're going to get the experience of 10 years of your average Colorado real estate agent. Yeah. And that's invaluable in terms of negotiation experience. But it's not over. Even I've been doing this over 20 years. It's not over for me. I'm still learning. Every deal I learn something new. And sometimes it's about human nature. Sometimes it's about other things. It's about the real estate itself. It's about structural issues, repair issues, health and safety issues. EFIS. Wow. Yeah. I feel like I've reached a level of EFIS proficiency at this point I don't know if they're going to redevelop a new version of EFIS, but it'll be something else in the future. Mm-hmm. Every real estate is very unique and interesting and engaging because it's so different.
You have to stay on your toes, Yeah. Change is inevitable.
So, Grant, I'm a little afraid that we may have spoiled you for commercial real estate because the level of professionalism in the investment community was much, much higher. Mm-hmm. Still, the shenanigans were there for sure, at least in the firms I worked for. It wasn't quite Wolf of Wall Street shenanigans, but there were definitely shenanigans going on. And there are shenanigans in the resi industry too, but in residential real estate, it's more colorful. I think there's more opportunities, and I feel like our company is also very flexible with, work from home, work from wherever, as long as the work's getting done. And let's create better systems to get the work done and call each of us to do our best. And I feel like, I don't know if other firms are doing that. My personal experience was that often they have toxic cultures and they're kind of boiler rooms and they're challenging.
Hustle culture.
But you learn a lot.
Yeah.
Hustle culture, but you learn the analytical rigor at investment firms is super high for a first-year analyst or first 3 years as an analyst. You will learn tons and tons about asset classes and analysis in the financial world.
Yeah, I am certainly spoiled here.
You didn't get us coffee once. Nope.
Oh, not even once.
Not even once.
We just had our celebration of Grant's internship and Hamish's home purchase combo. Once a month, we like to do at least a gathering together that's social and fun. And we did it last night at Torchy's. And Grant did come up to the counter and order with me, which I appreciate you doing that. But yeah, not a single coffee. Huh.
I
don't know. Yeah, maybe if you need something.
Yeah, well, you're still with us till Thursday, so yeah, there might be time.
If you're up an escape route today, Osman, that would just be the worst one.
I'll tell you, my only rule for employees and interns has been I will never ask somebody to do something I'm not willing to do.
Mm.
So if I'm not willing to scrub the toilet, I'm not going to ask you to do it. And it's not just willing to do it, I have to go do it. Every now and then I got to take out the trash. I got to scrub the toilet. That's part of being a boss that is doing the work, right?
Yeah.
It's from my perspective, that's leadership in a way that values everybody. Right. And I think frankly, I think all work it's like a philosophical thing. I respect all work. Years and years ago, I was in Japan with Leah and we were at the train station. Random story, but we'll end on this because we're a little bit past an hour.
Make it
And
poignant.
it was worth listening to this story. So I went with my Rotary Club to Japan and the Shinkansen, the high-speed train came through the station. And I don't know, and we might have been in Tokyo. I don't remember where we were, but what I do remember is that there were these people that were in uniform and they were wearing white gloves and they were cleaning. And they were cleaning everything. Like the level of cleanliness and fastidiousness in Japan blew my mind. You do not see litter everywhere. It's just amazing how much they care about their environment. And these people are working and cleaning and they're wearing blue uniforms. And when the Shinkansen came through, they stopped working and they bowed to the train. And I'm getting a little chills about this because it was just this sense of respect for others and their work and the progress the society is making together. And I know there's all sorts of, this topic could go sideways very easily, but you see the same thing with the Japanese when they leave a soccer stadium, right? Like they clean the stadium on the way out. There's a respect for work. So I firmly believe that even getting coffee is work that's worth doing. But if I'm not willing to get coffee, I'm never going to ask anybody else to get coffee. This is not Swimming with Sharks with Kevin Spacey, that movie. Yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts, guys? I've done, as usual, unfortunately, most of the talking. But what have you guys? You guys have any last things to add?
No, I think we're pretty solid. I've got a lot of first-time home buying things coming up, so that could be a podcast maybe in a little bit once the dust is settled or something. But
all right. Yeah. Sounds good, Hamish. Well, Grant, thank you for being an intern. Thank you for being our reboot first guest. And I'm Osman with House Einstein. If you're looking for representation on the buy or sell side here in Colorado, we have agents in Denver. We're here in Boulder. We're now doing stuff in Summit County and Grand County and, of course, the foothills. We represent both buyers and sellers, and our goal is to help you make a smarter real estate decision. You can find us at houseeinstein.com. Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. Thank you so much for commenting, and we'll catch you next time.